So after looking at the quiz process for short, um, we have now a goal of for each phases we already described the flow, but here we will identify the goal or the purpose of each phase. So for business understanding, just like let me read, clarify the business goals for the data managed mining project, convert the goals into a predictive analysis problem, and design a project plan to accomplish these objectives. So this is a general definition, a general idea of the project. Data understanding is data gathered to be used, become familiar with the data, and identify any data quality problems that must be addressed. So these are identifying maybe the sources of data, um, lacking data that might arise based on your business understanding. So at this point, you must already identify if those data that might support for the decision-making part of business understanding can be addressed, so that we can define the limit or the support of the data on the expected decision-making process. And the third phase is the data preparation, which in this part we select a subset of data to be used, clean data to address quality issues, and transform data into form suitable for analysis. So in this part, this is where we convert some of our data into another form for us to easily analyze. In the computer science perspective, sometimes we convert data for us to easily process the data for the purpose of, example, less storage, or for easy processing given the tools that we are using. We are very familiar with this one when we do quantitative analysis in research. For instance, we convert 0 and 1 for the gender items, because it's easier to process data into numbers sometimes than letters, male or words, male and female. Fourth is we have modeling, apply selected modeling techniques. There are already tools used to form a model. A simple model, for instance, is in the previous one, the linear regression can be an example of a model of a certain decisions, and a model that can support decision making. The moving average is also a common practice, or the exponential smoothing for time series analysis are very simple modeling techniques, used for modeling, but simple and easy to use, and doesn't require a lot of analysis. Evaluation is assessed if the model achieves business goals. So that means we will try now to look at the applicability of the model. Sometimes this can be defined as error of the model. And deployment is deploy the model into the organization's decision-making process. So here we already allow the actual users to use our defined or applications that we are developing or formulated from the data mining project. Here, there are some examples showing how data mining can be used. So you can pause the slide and read some of the examples here. Another term commonly used in business, most of the organization use this term now, is key performance indicator. This is a metric that tracks progress in executing chosen strategies to attain organizational objectives and goals, and consists of a direction, measure, target, and time frame. So KPI here is a good idea on how to determine our progress. So here are some example of a KPI, because KPI is an input to dashboard. So let me introduce first what dashboard is. A presentation of a set of key performance indicator about the state of a process at a specific point in time. So first we will define the metric or key performance indicator. Tapos we will look at the dashboard on how we can present the KPIs. So here we will consider that a KPI if we have how many components? 1, 2, 3, and 4. So there are components or attributes that defines a KPI, and that would be, it's clear already that there's a direction aspect, there is a measure aspect, target, and the time frame. So here we give examples of a correct KPI to be used in decision making or in data mining concepts or business intelligence in general. So for a certain university, for instance, a KPI is increase the 5-year graduation rate for incoming freshmen to at least 80% starting with the graduating class of 2022. So it's a very specific KPI where there is a direction, meaning an increase. Second is the measure. There is a way to measure, and that can be measured through a certain target or percentage and the expected time frame that the KPI can be achieved. Second is for a customer service department, you have increased the number of customer phone calls answered within the first 4 weeks, because can be measured, to at least 90% within the next 3 months. And last example is for HR organization, reduce the number of voluntary resignations and termination for performance to 6% or less for the 2018 fiscal year and subsequent years. So it's very clear, but sometimes we define KPI depending on the purpose. So these are an example of KPI. Why is it this is why the 4 attributes is very important? Because this can be used in the presentation later in your dashboard or in any tool that you'll be used to assist decision making, or this can be used to measure also if you achieve or somewhat aligned with the KPI that you are doing or what you are doing. Okay, so this is another concept common for BI, which I mentioned before. Here we have self-service analytics, training techniques and processes that empower end users to work independently to assess data from approved sources to perform their own analysis using an endorsed set of tools. Earlier, we say that to be an effective, there are components of an organization to implement effectively the business intelligence, and one component is the data scientist. But in self-service analytics, we consider end user as part of the data scientist. That means you don't need really a data scientist, your proper data scientist, but you can exploit the idea or the talent of your users in the analysis. What is good with self-service analytics is that during most probably understanding the data is easier for the end user or the user of the application. It's because they are already familiar with the data and they know the business context or the context in which data can be used. So the reason why self-service analytics was introduced is that we don't have a lot of expertise, and sometimes data scientists can be assigned to a certain department, but there's already a trend now to pass through other processes to the end user. For instance, this is in line with the trend of exploiting your customer to input. So for instance, BPI has already implemented this one. Instead of the teller in the bank, if the teller inputting the amount of deposit, they require the customer to input it, and they will just verify it. So that's passing the responsibility to the customer. The same concept with this one, but this one is on analytics. Supposed to be there are a set of people assigned, which they call data scientists in the organization. But because there might be limitation and there are users who are innovative enough to do the analysis for them to improve their process. So this way of implementing BI is good. But there are things that remind us in implementing self-service analytics is this one. Although in general self-service analytics is good, but there are issues on sensitive information used by the organization. If you allow access of your data, the organization must also make sure that it has not shared any sensitive information that might be used against them. Financial information might not be good for the user for the organization to be shared to the user, including names. So the organization needs a standard way to organize data before allowing its end users to do their own analytics. So these are the pros and cons associated with self-service business intelligence and analytics. So take time to read and identify the processes. So you can pause the video to read the pros and cons. This slide contains the different vendor of business intelligence. If you look at this set of vendors, the majority of them or all of them are requires a license. So you can check that the expected output. These are product BI in our first definition. The HP example IBM. So and the product as the name of the BI tool. So example, I'm very familiar with Power BI for Office 365, which was introduced to us during my master's. The IBM or the IBM Cognos Business Intelligence was also introduced to us by our classmates, one of our classmates in IBM. And of course, we are familiar with SAS, Oracle, but I haven't used them or seen them used in the organizational setup. And even those who are introduced to us was I was not a, I don't have any experience of actually using them. Uh, and the last, maybe last, before the end of the slide or before the summary, this one is a types of information processing. So in our introductory video, I've already introduced the transaction processing system. This one is a comparison between the transaction processing and the analytical processing. Why I included this one so that we can already connect what we have discussed for today and the analytical aspects. Because our data in the analytical processing is very dependent on the transaction processing. So we here look at the transaction processing focuses on data item processing, meaning insertion, modification, and deletion, transmission, and even some non-analytical query that is done in the transaction processing. That means when we capture data used later for analysis, it's part of the transaction processing. That means if we do the transaction processing of the processes or data collection in the organization, we will somehow already analyze how it will be used later by the organization to support decision making or on the analytical processing part. So it's quite critical for us to think that TPS must also be organized within the organization. That's one component, that strong data management. And before we will do the analytical processing, which is the business intelligence aspect. Okay, so let me summarize the concept behind my discussion for today. Aside from the terms that you must learn, we have one principle, which is the principle of the course. Number one, the goal of BI and analytics is to support improved decision making. So the point of discussion here is that as much as possible, we are learning the concept of BI to have a good decision or to have the good basis of decision making within the organization, and also an orientation to us that support a decision with supporting data is a very good decision. Second is there are many BI and analytics techniques and tools that can be used in a wide range of problem solving situations. So even if we have already the BI doesn't only include the tools included the tools or the analytics side or the computer side. It's also part of business intelligence, the processes and procedures or the people involved doing the actual analytics. So we are looking here business intelligence at the socio-technical perspective. That means we're looking at the people side and as well as on the technical side. I think that's it for this lecture, and I hope you've learned something.